At 2:17 hours on February 9, 1943, the North Atlantic was not just dark, it was deadly. Snow was blowing sideways across the sea, cutting visibility to almost nothing. Waves rose like black walls and crashed down on steel hulls with violent force. HMS Duke of York forced her way forward, her bow slamming into the water again and again, ice forming instantly on railings and gun turrets. Deep inside the ship, far below the bridge, able seaman Thomas Hale sat alone in a small radar compartment. The room was cramped, noisy, and hot compared to the freezing deck above. Hale was only 22 years old and had joined the Royal Navy less than a year earlier. He had never seen combat like this before. In front of him was a glowing green radar screen, sweeping slowly in a circle. Most nights it showed nothing but empty ocean. But tonight something was different, and Hale could feel it before he even understood it. As the radar sweep passed the northern sector, Hale noticed a faint mark appear near the edge of the screen. It was weak, almost invisible, and could easily have been dismissed as interference or sea clutter. Hale did not ignore it. He adjusted the controls carefully, refined the signal, and watched the screen again. The mark returned. Same bearing. Same range. Now stronger. Hale leaned forward until his face was inches from the glass. The contact was moving fast, far faster than any merchant ship. Too large to be a fishing boat. Too controlled to be a weather effect. Hale's heart began to race. Every sailor in the Atlantic knew the rumors. German surface raiders were back at sea. The battlecruiser Scharnhorst had vanished weeks earlier. Hale reached for the sound-powered phone and reported calmly, even though his hands were shaking. Bearing 032 degrees. Range 23,000 yards. Confirmed contact. That single report would change everything that followed. On the bridge of HMS Duke of York, Captain Sir Bruce Fraser listened without interruption. He understood radar. He trusted it. Fraser asked short, precise questions and received clear answers. There was no hesitation. Orders were given immediately. The fleet altered course. Destroyers were sent ahead to investigate. Guns were manned and ammunition hoists activated. Throughout the ship, alarms sounded and sailors moved to action stations through narrow steel passageways. None of them could see the enemy. Snow, darkness, and storm hid everything beyond a few thousand yards. But radar had already removed the enemy's greatest protection. While the German ship believed itself hidden, British ships tracked it constantly. Every turn, every speed change, every attempt to escape appeared clearly on radar screens. The ocean was no longer blind. Technology had turned night into vision. Aboard the German battlecruiser Scharnhorst, Admiral Erich Bay believed the storm favored him. His ship was fast, powerful, and heavily armed. Snow squalls blinded British lookouts and hid his movements. German radar had already been damaged earlier in the mission, leaving the ship dependent on eyesight alone. At 9:24 hours, British destroyers launched torpedoes guided only by radar data. One struck Scharnhorst's starboard side, ripping open compartments and flooding machinery spaces. Speed dropped. Smoke filled passageways. Engineers fought desperately to maintain power. British battleships closed in. At 11:01 hours, HMS Duke of York opened fire using radar-controlled gunnery. Shells slammed into Scharnhorst with terrifying accuracy. German gunners returned fire blindly, aiming at flashes they could barely see. The battle had become completely one-sided. For hours, radar guided British fire through snow, smoke, and darkness. Scharnhorst attempted to flee, but every move was tracked. Destroyers attacked repeatedly, launching torpedoes from different directions. Fires spread across the German ship. Flooding worsened. By evening, Scharnhorst could barely move. At 19:45 hours, the final torpedo struck. The ship rolled slowly to port, her massive propellers lifting out of the water before she disappeared beneath the freezing Atlantic. Nearly 2,000 German sailors went down with her. Only 36 survived the icy water. Back aboard HMS Duke of York, Thomas Hale continued watching his radar screen. The contact faded. then vanished. The ocean was empty again. Hale logged the time, the bearing, and the result. No celebration. No applause. Just silence and exhaustion. The sinking of Scharnhorst changed naval warfare forever. It proved that radar was no longer experimental equipment, but a primary weapon. After that night, navies rewrote doctrine. Radar operators became combat specialists. Fire control systems were redesigned. Fleets trained to fight without visual contact. Thomas Hale survived the war and returned to civilian life, never famous, never decorated publicly. But historians later agreed that the Battle of the North Cape was the first true radar-dominated naval battle in history. A single faint signal, detected by a young sailor below deck, saved a convoy and demonstrated the future of warfare. Sometimes history is not decided by what men see with their eyes, but by what they are willing to trust on a glowing screen in the dark. Destroyers attacked again and again throughout the day, guided by radar that never lost contact. Torpedoes struck from different directions, each hit slowing Scharnhorst further. Flooding spread uncontrollably. Ammunition detonated inside damaged compartments. Crew members fought fires with numb hands and frozen equipment. Orders echoed through smoke-filled corridors. Discipline held, but hope faded. By late afternoon, the once powerful battlecruiser could barely move. Her speed was gone. Her fate was sealed long before the final blow arrived. At 1945 hours, the final torpedo struck. The explosion tore deep into the hull. Scharnhorst began to list heavily to port. Crew members struggled to reach the deck as water rushed in. The ship rolled slowly, painfully. Her massive propellers lifted into the air, spinning uselessly. Then, silently, she slipped beneath the freezing Atlantic. Nearly 2,000 German sailors went down with her. Only 36 survived the icy water. The ocean closed over the wreck, indifferent and silent. Back aboard HMS Duke of York, there was no celebration. Sailors were exhausted, cold, and emotionally drained. Inside the radar compartment, Thomas Hale watched as the contact faded from his screen. Then it disappeared completely. The screen showed nothing but empty sea once more. Hale removed his headphones slowly. His hands were shaking, not from cold, but from realization. He wrote the final entry in the radar log. Enemy contact lost. Enemy sunk. No cheers followed. Only silence. The Battle of the North Cape marked a turning point in naval warfare. It proved that radar was no longer experimental technology. It was a decisive weapon. Navies around the world took notice immediately. Training programs expanded rapidly. Radar operators became frontline combat specialists. Fire control systems were redesigned to depend on electronic data instead of eyesight. Ships were refitted at record speed. Doctrine changed forever. Darkness, fog, and storms no longer offered safety. Thomas Hale survived the war. He never fired a gun or stood on the bridge during battle. His war was fought quietly, below deck, surrounded by humming machines. After the war, he returned to civilian life and worked as a radio technician. He rarely spoke about his service. Like many radar operators, his contribution was invisible to the public. But historians later understood that men like Hale shaped the outcome of the Atlantic War. Today, modern warfare depends on satellites, sensors, and digital networks. But it all began with moments like this. A faint signal. A young sailor. A decision not to ignore what others might dismiss. The night Scharnhorst sank marked the end of the sea's darkness. History changed quietly, not with a shout, but with a calm voice reporting a contact on a glowing screen. Sometimes the greatest turning points happen far from the guns, in silence, where only attention and trust decide the future.